welcome to another Rules Primer video. Today we're going to be looking at A Few Acres of Snow, which is a Eurogame, Wargame, deck building mashup, two-player game designed by Martin Wallace and published by Tree Frog Games. I'm going to quickly go over the components of the game and then the victory conditions and the turn order, and then we're going to go into each of the available actions in the game. Hopefully by the end of the video you'll have kind of a general idea on how to play, and you can sit down and play without having to do a lot of rules instructions. So let's look at the components. Okay, here I have the game set up at the beginning, at the starting setup. And I'm going to start over here at the bottom left corner and just kind of go around the board. First you have the rule book, of course. And it also comes with two player aids, which are really nice, double-sided. On one side is a list of all the actions, and on the other side is a list of all the available Empire cards. Each side of the board has a section for different decks. The first one is the available location cards. These, when you conquer or when you settle a location, you get to take the location card of that location and put it into your deck, add it to your deck. These give you different things based on the icons on the card, and you can use them for various actions and stuff. Next are the available Empire cards. You can draft these cards as one of your actions, and that each Empire card has a cost, or well, some of them do. Some of them are free. And then they do various things depending upon what the card is, of course. Then there's a spot for your reserves. You can, as one of your actions, place some cards into the reserve and then pull them out later. It's kind of a way of saving cards to use on later turns. Then you have your draw deck. You're going to start with each side starts with a starter deck. The starter cards are denoted with this little 1 and also a slightly darker background. And you're going to draw from these, of course, during the game, and then when your draw deck runs out, you're going to take your discard pile and shuffle it back to make a new draw deck, just like in Dominion. Then each player has a space for British siege cards and for French siege cards. When you siege a location, you're going to be playing cards into these to reinforce your forces in the siege. Then you have the map itself. These are villages. The square tokens denote villages, and the round ones denote cities. You can see that the British player starts out with cities in New York and in Boston, and then villages kind of along the coast here. The French starts out with a city in Quebec, and then villages kind of scattered all throughout the map. If you look at the locations on the map, some of them are marked with a little settler icon. This means to settle that location, to place a village there, you're going to have to play a card with a settler icon on it in addition to the other cards you have to play. Some locations also have victory point symbols. Those are the points you're going to get at the end of the game, and if you have a village there, if you have a city there, you'll actually get double those number of points. Some spaces also have a ship icon, which means they're connected to other places with ship icons, and it also means that you can use a ship in the sieges in those locations. The various locations are connected by these little dotted lines, which are Indian trails, and these little waterways, which are rivers, and then there are some roads as well, such as this kind of stuff. And let's see, okay, other parts of the board, there's also a British siege track and a French siege track. Sieges are almost like tug-of-war type of things. On your turn, you can reinforce the siege, which will move the marker. Where did I put the markers? These the markers? No. Ah, here they are, markers. On your turn, you can play cards to reinforce the siege, which will move your marker closer into your area. And then if you are ahead a certain number of points ahead at the beginning of your turn, you're going to win the siege, and the siege will end. Let's see. Over here we have silver money coins, which are worth 1, gold money coins, which are worth 5, These are used to denote fortifications. If you use the action to fortify a location, you can place one of those markers underneath your village or your city. These are neutral empire cards, which means either player can draft these. And I believe that's it. Each player has this is used to mark the location that's currently under siege. And then each player has a supply of city tokens and village cubes. So that's the components. Let's go over the victory conditions. There are 5 different ways the game can end. First of all, the British player immediately wins the game if he's able to win a siege in Quebec. The French player immediately wins the game if he's able to win a siege in New York or in Boston. Also, if at the beginning of a player's turn there are no sieges and a player has put all of his cubes or discs out onto the board, then the game ends and you score victory. Whoever has the most victory points wins. The game also ends if a player is able to collect 12 points worth of their opponent's discs or cubes. So every time you take over a location from your opponent, you get to keep the cube or the disc that was in that location. Cubes are worth 2 points and discs are worth 4. If you ever collect 12 points worth, then the game ends. When you go count up the victory points, you do that by counting up all the victory points for the locations in which you have a cube or a disc. Now remember, if you have a disc in a location, then that's worth double. So for example, if the British player had settled Kansko, that would be worth 2 points at the end of the game. However, if they had developed Kanso, sorry, I'm from Texas, I don't know these places. That would be worth 4 points. You also add to that score any of the opponent's cubes or discs that you've collected. Whoever has the most victory points wins the game. If there's a tie, the French player wins the game. Okay, so let's look at the turn sequence. Okay, the turn sequence in this game is very simple. There's only 3 steps. The first step is to check to see if you have won a siege. So at the beginning of your turn, a place is under siege, and you, like say this is the British player's turn. There's a location under siege. Let's just say, something like that. Then you're going to look and see if you are ahead of the track by at least 2 points. Then you've won that siege. The siege is over. The next step is to perform 2 actions. Now at the beginning of the turn, the very first turn, each player only gets 1 action, but every other turn you get 2 actions. And there's a huge list of actions. That's where the complexity in the game comes from. Oops, sorry. There's tons of actions. And so you get to make 2 actions plus as many free actions as you want or are able to do on your turn. Then the last step is you refill your hand up to 5. Now if you have more than 5 cards in your hand, you don't discard down to 5 cards, but you just don't draw anymore. So once you've drawn back up to 5 cards, that's the end of your turn. It's the next player's turn. And then they follow the same sequence. So you can see the turn order and the turn sequence is very simple. The complexity comes from all the available actions, which is what we'll look at next. Okay, there are a lot of actions, so we're going to kind of look at them in the same grouping that the rulebook does. First, we're going to look at the expansive actions. These are actions that let you expand your empire into new places. The first of which is to settle a location. So if you choose to settle a location, that's going to be one of your actions. And the first thing you have to do is you have to pick the location you want to settle. So in this example, we're going to try to settle Deerfield here. You have to have a location that connects to Deerfield. So in this case, we have New Haven connects to Deerfield, and you have to have the card of that location. So if this was our starting hand, we have the New Haven card in our starting hand, and it says that it connects to Deerfield via a bateau or a boat. And so you're going to play that card. I'm going to play the New Haven card. That's going to go into my discard pile. Then I'm going to have to play a boat card to get there. So I have a couple of boat cards. I think we'll play St. Mary's. See, have a boat. So play that into my discard pile. Now I'm able to get to Deerfield. Now, if your location does not have a settler icon, then you just place your cube there. But since Deerfield does have a settler icon, we're going to have to play a card that has a settler icon. Luckily, I have a couple of those in my hand. So I'll play Philadelphia. Now I get to take a village cube and place it in Deerfield. And then, very important, don't forget this, I get to go and look through my available location cards and find the Deerfield card and place it into my discard pile. So now you can see, now that I've captured Deerfield, I'll have a way to get to New Haven by boat, and I'll also have a way to get some money. So once the discard pile gets shuffled back into my draw deck, that is. So that's the settle location action, and you can see you can only settle location if there's not an opponent cube there, if it's a neutral location. And then also settling locations also gives you victory points, so it's an important action. The next action we're going to look at is to develop a location. So to do that, let me take my hand back. Actually, let's say this is our new hand, a couple turns down the road. And say I've decided I wanted to develop Deerfield, because if I develop Deerfield, I'll have a city there, or a town there, and I'll get double the number of victory points at the end of the game. So to develop a location, you have to have the intended location card, in this case, Deerfield, and you have to have a card with a settler symbol. So I'm going to discard Deerfield, and I'm going to find a card with a settler location, settler icon there, and now I get to replace the cube in Deerfield with a disc. And the third expansive action is to fortify a location. So to fortify a location, you have to have fortification card, and you're going to play the intended location. So say I wanted to fortify Deerfield, I need to play the Deerfield card, I need to play the fortification card, and I need to play free money to the bank. And when I do that, I get to take a fortification disc, a black fortification disc, and place it under the Deerfield disc. Now I can do that with a city or with a village, and what that does is it makes it immune to raids and also gives it a bonus when you're defending. So those are the expansive actions. Next we're going to look at the aggressive actions. Okay, the first aggressive action is to besiege a location. So in this example, you can see that that the French player has settled Fort William Henry, and which is getting a little close to my empire. So I'm going to besiege Fort William Henry. To do that, I need to find a location that's connected to the location I want to besiege. So in this case, I have Albany. You can see this is my hand, so I'm going to play the card for the city for the location that's connected to it. So in this case, Albany. You can see that Albany connects to Fort William Henry via bateau. So I'm going to play that into my discard pile. Then I need to play how I'm going to get there. So I need to play a card that has a bateau on it. So I can play St. Mary's, that has one. So I'll play that into my discard pile. Now I need to play a military card, only one military card. It has to have at least one military strength. So I have this regular infantry in my hand. It has 2 military strength. So I'm going to play that into my British siege. Since I'm the British player, I'm going to be starting this siege. I'm going to play that in my British siege section. And now I get to place my siege marker on Fort William Henry. Now, each location has an intrinsic defensive value of 1. So I'm going to move my British siege track from 0 to 1 towards the French side, of course. So that's its defense. Now I played a regular infantry, so I have 2. So I'm going to move this 1, 2. You can see that that's up by 1. Now some locations have a larger intrinsic defensive value. You can see Quebec has 2 there, New York has 1. So if that's the case, you're going to have to add that in as well. Also, some locations are fortified. If they're fortified with the black discs, then you're going to have to add that in as well. So that's how you besiege a location. That starts a siege, and then at the beginning of every turn you check to see if you end it. You can also spend actions to reinforce the siege to move the track up or down. The second aggressive action is to reinforce the siege, and what you do there is you just take a card with military strength, for example this regular infantry, and play it to your siege location. So if you want to play it to your offensive siege, like if I'm the British player, then I could play it there. If I wanted to play it to the defensive siege, I'd play it here. And what you do then, you just add up those two icons and move it two more, like so. Now, also, if the location that's under siege has a ship icon, you can play cards that have a ship icon as one military strength. So I can play that there. Now, you can only play one card per action that you spend reinforcing a siege. So if you have several military cards in your hand and you want to put them all into the siege, then you're going to need to spend 2 actions to do that. Okay, the next aggressive action is the raid. To play a raid, to start a raid, you have to play a card that allows you to raid, like a Native American. This says pay 1 money to use this card to raid or ambush. So you play a card, pay the money, pick a location that's connected to the location that you want to raid. So for example, let's say the French had Fort Halifax. Now a location can be connected by river or Indian trail or road, not by ship. It could also be connected by lake. And you can increase the range of your raid by playing additional cards like the Indian leader, or the priest, the Indian leader or the priest. That will give you additional range for your raid. So then you play the card, and you play any additional cards that you want to play to increase the range. Now your opponent gets an opportunity to block the raid. You can do that by either playing a card that blocks a raid, such as their own Native American card that says block 1 ambush or raid, or by playing the card of the location that's being raided that will also block the raid. If they're not able to raid, then they basically have to remove the cube. Now you can't put your own cube there. The Indians didn't settle the location, they just raided it. But on the next turn or with your next action, you can try to settle the location. So basically, when you do successfully raid a location, be sure you keep the opponent's cube, because that will give you victory points at the end of the game, and also that's another way that the game can end if you collect 12 points worth of opponent cubes. So that's a raid. That's the raid action. The next action is an ambush action. To play the ambush action, you play a card that will give you that action. For example, this Native American says to pay 1 money to use this card to raid or ambush. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to use this card to ambush. I'm going to pay the 1 gold. And now the opponent has an opportunity to prevent the ambush. You do that by playing a card that says it prevents an ambush. So if they have their own Native American card, it says block 1 ambush or raid. But if they're not able to block the ambush, then they're going to have to take their hand of cards or their reserve, and they're going to have to find a card that has this little raid symbol on it, little Native American symbol, and they're going to lose that card permanently back into their Empire deck, available Empire cards, or if it's a location, I don't know if there's locations, but you're basically going to have to put it back in your available cards. So if you want it again, you have to pay the money to draft it again and spend the action. So that's the ambush action. Okay, I think we've gone over the expansive actions and the aggressive actions. I'm going to go over quickly some of the more important actions, and then go over some of the other cards. One of the most important actions, I'm sure, as you can see, is to draft a card. So you can spend an action, then look through your available Empire cards, and pick a card, basically. And if you pick a card that has a number up here, you're going to have to pay that number of money to the bank. You can also spend an action to discard 1 or more cards from your hand into your discard pile. The first card doesn't cost anything, and every card after that costs 1 money. Then as the last part of your turn, you draw back up to 5 cards. You can also reserve 1 card. You basically place a card from your hand into the reserve. You can only do you can only have 5 cards in the reserve at a time. You can also spend an action to retrieve your reserve. You take all of the cards from your reserve and put them back in your hand. You must pay 1 money for each of the cards that you take. So if you have 5 in here and you take all 5, you're going to have to pay 5 money to the bank. So you can also withdraw from a siege. You can remove your siege marker and then just kind of give up on a siege, or you can pass and do nothing as an action. Okay, so now let's look at some of the other cards and some of the different actions involved with them. Here's the Indian Leader card. Basically, it allows you to take 1 Native American card from your opponent, and you can also play it to increase the range of a raid by 1. You can also take the action to take money. So basically, you just discard a card that has money, and you get that amount of money from the bank. You can also use a merchant action. To do that, you discard a card that has a ship icon, and then you discard up to 1 or 2 cards that have the money icons, and you'll get the money for that. So in this case, I would discard New Haven, and then also I could discard New York and Philadelphia and get a total of 6 gold. You can take the trader action, so you play a trader card, and then you get 2 gold for every card you discard that has a fur icon on it. So in this case, I would discard the trader and discard Gatsby and Troy Rivières, and I would get a total of 4 gold. The French player has a Louisbourg card, has a piracy on it, which allows you to play a card with a ship symbol, and you can take 2 money from the British player. So if I played Port Royal, then I could take 2 money from the British player because it has a ship icon. There's also a governor card, which you can play to remove one of your cards, basically, to thin your deck. Surprisingly powerful card. There's a home support card, which you can play to take 3 cards from your deck as a free action. And then finally, there's a French card called the Intendant, which you pay 2 money, and you can take 1 card of your choice from your discard pile, and place it in your hand. So you can basically pull a card back from your discard. So overall, those are the actions that you can take. You get to take 2 actions each turn, except for the first turn, which you only get 1 action, and then you get as many free actions as you want. Luckily, all these actions are well summarized on the player display sheet, as well as all the cards are displayed on the back, so that you'll know what each card does. It's easy to find. So overall, that's the game. That's A Few Acres of Snow. Hope you enjoy it and have fun playing.